By the time the county microphone reached Wayne Thornton, the crowd had already decided what kind of man he was. He had come in a faded green pickup with 412,000 miles on the odometer, mud still dried in the wheel wells from a pasture check at daylight, and a cracked bench seat that leaned slightly toward the door. Dale Mercer noticed the truck first, the same way he always did, and gave the same half-smile he used when he thought he had the room figured out. The county field day in September 2024 was supposed to be about drainage rehabilitation and rotational grazing outcomes. Maria Ruiz had planned a technical agenda with water maps, forage charts, and soil cores laid out on folding tables. What she did not plan was the social reversal that would happen when Ruth Thornton set a 3-ring binder on the table by the microphone, opened it to one tab marked Balance Sheet, and read out loud a net worth of $3,855,000 with $0 of debt. No one in that circle had ever heard Wayne announce a number about himself. He never explained his truck, never corrected assumptions, never argued at coffee counters, and never followed a dismissal home in his head. Dale had once told him, in front of 2 mechanics and a parts manager, that the only way to stay competitive now was to finance newer iron and move quickly. Wayne answered with one sentence, said he would keep rebuilding what he owned, and left with 2 hydraulic hoses and a $12 gasket. That memory came back hard when Ruth read the final line and closed the binder. Maria followed with farm-level metrics, not opinions. 11.6 miles of drain tile replaced across the property. 8.4 miles of perimeter and interior fence rebuilt. Hay ground yield up from 1.9 tons per acre to 4.2 tons per acre. Herd growth from 42 cows in 2017 to 186 cows and 7 bulls in 2024. She said the data slowly, like she knew each number had to settle before the next one arrived. A banker from town lowered his pen and looked at the binder again. Dale stared at Wayne's truck instead, as if the mileage might now be negotiable. Wayne did not smile, did not posture, and did not deliver a speech. He asked Ruth whether they had time to check the north water gap before supper, and he waited while she zipped the binder. That was the entire reveal, public and complete, and it only made sense once the story went back to the year everyone walked away from Miller Ridge. In early 2014, Miller Ridge had already failed 3 listings. The farm covered 318 acres, rolling and useful on paper, but the reality at ground level scared away nearly every serious buyer. There was no habitable house left on it. The old farmhouse had a collapsed roofline and mold through the joists, and county code required demolition before occupancy anywhere near that foundation footprint. Fence lines had gaps large enough for calves to walk through, and the interior cross-fencing was functionally gone. The drainage system had reached the point where heavy spring water sat in the same depressions for days, and that turned workable acres into liability. The asking sequence told its own story. The first listing sat near regional averages and drew no offers. The second dropped and drew interest from 2 neighboring operators, including Cole Haskins, who both backed out after contractors estimated immediate restoration costs above $300,000 before the first full production year. The third listing fell again. Buyers still walked, because the entry barrier was not the purchase price alone. The entry barrier was purchase plus restoration plus lost time, all while carrying normal farm operating risk. That combination made the arithmetic look dangerous to anyone entering with borrowed money. Wayne and Ruth showed up with a different balance sheet and a different time horizon. They had sold a prior paid-off farm the previous year after a family succession change made staying there impractical, and they came into 2014 with sale proceeds and retained earnings that allowed cash decisions. They bought Miller Ridge for $348,000 cash. That purchase resolved the biggest barrier they could not solve later, ownership itself, and it made every following improvement, permanent equity instead of loan collateral. Owning it outright created a second problem immediately, because ownership without restoration would have left them with an expensive pasture of problems. Ruth opened a yellow ledger and built a 3-year rehabilitation plan with one non-negotiable rule: no personal debt taken during restoration. They committed an initial restoration budget of $332,000 from cash reserves and operating income. They knew the pace would be slower than financed expansion, and they accepted that trade-off because slow progress without forced payments kept them in control during bad years. The first restoration season in 2014 started with brush and access. Crews cleared old hedge growth from lane edges and paddock boundaries, making equipment movement possible, and reducing tire damage that had been eating money for whoever came before. Every cleared lane resolved one physical bottleneck that had been blocking larger repairs, especially tile work and fencing. Wayne spent evenings marking low spots with flags after storms, walking the same sections twice to avoid paying for misplaced excavation. In 2015, they moved into the expensive middle. Drainage contractors replaced and relaid sections until total tile replacement reached 11.6 miles across the farm. Wayne insisted on seeing grade checks in person at every major run. Maria Ruiz, who knew the watershed and local runoff patterns, reviewed maps and suggested outlet protections that reduced erosion risk during spring surges. That solved the immediate obstacle of recurring saturation and opened acreage that had never been reliable under the prior system. In 2016, fencing became the bottleneck. Without secure perimeter and interior lines, rotational grazing would stay theoretical. They rebuilt 8.4 miles of fence, combining perimeter durability with interior flexibility so paddocks could change with season and forage conditions. This phase consumed cash and patience at the same time. Ruth tracked every post order, every wire invoice, and every rented pounder hour because uncontrolled fencing costs could quietly break the whole plan. Completing those 8.4 miles resolved livestock control and made a grazing system possible in 2017 instead of remaining a notebook idea. The 3-year restoration budget of $332,000 held because they stayed disciplined on sequence. They spent first on systems that multiplied future productivity, not on visible upgrades. No decorative barn repaints, no new office, and no replacement pickup. Wayne still drove the same truck into town, and that kept generating the same social reading, that he must be undercapitalized. He never corrected it. The math was busy doing the correction without him. By spring 2017, the farm was finally ready to carry livestock the way Wayne had planned. He started with an initial herd of 42 cows, conservative for 318 acres, because he wanted forage buffers rather than emergency feed purchases. He also committed 124 acres to hay ground management. Knowing recovered hay output would support herd growth and stabilize winter feed costs. The obstacle at this stage was revenue volatility, and the way he solved it was diversification inside the same land base: cattle, hay, and some custom grazing contracts with neighbors who needed summer pasture. That first grazing year carried stress in small daily decisions. Move too early and regrowth suffered. Move too late and quality dropped. Wayne kept simple paddock notes on a weathered clipboard: forage height, recovery days, water trough issues, Mineral consumption. Ruth translated those field notes into monthly cash summaries. Their system resolved a hesitation many farms never solve. Field decisions and financial decisions were now speaking to each other in real time. They could see where management was creating margin and where it was leaking. In 2018, they reached the first full profitable year from cattle, hay, and custom grazing. Profit did not arrive as a dramatic windfall. It arrived as costs controlled tightly enough that gross income finally had room to breathe. Hay output moved upward from the old baseline, and better forage cut purchased feed. Custom grazing checks came in on schedule because paddock reliability had improved. This resolved the core question hanging over the whole purchase, whether Miller Ridge could pay back its rehabilitation in operating life, not in resale fantasy. Around this same period, Cole Haskins was building a different strategy a few miles over. Cole was competent, hardworking, and widely respected for covering acres quickly, and that speed was financed through stacked obligations that looked manageable while yields held. He carried a 7-year machinery note on a combine and grain head, a 5-year note on a planter and tillage package, an annual operating credit that rolled each season into the next. He also leased additional acres on cash rent, which raised gross opportunity and locked in fixed commitments before weather had a vote. Janice Haskins kept his records as cleanly as anyone in the county and understood exactly where the pressure points were, interest costs, variable input spikes, and timing risk on cash rent. They were not careless people. They were operating under a framework that required stable years to keep breathing room. Dale Mercer fit naturally into that framework. He sold equipment, arranged terms, and measured seriousness by what sat on a trailer in the parking lot. Wayne's truck and cautious buying pattern read to him as hesitation, so Dale kept offering Wayne faster routes, bigger iron, payment plans. Wayne kept declining with the same calm tone and ordered parts instead. This ongoing dismissal set a social baseline that mattered later, because the room had to fully misread him before arithmetic could correct the record in the public. The weather test came into 2019 with a wet spring that overstayed every forecast. Fields across the county held water, planting windows narrowed, and yield losses hit operations already stretched by debt service. The stress on Cole's side became immediate, because his rent due dates and machinery payments arrived on schedule while harvestable bushels fell short, and every shortfall had to be bridged with higher cost carry. Wayne faced the same rain, same calendar, and same market uncertainty. The difference showed up in drainage performance and payment obligations. On Miller Ridge, rehabilitated tile moved water off in workable time, and Wayne stayed cash positive through the season. That result did not mean 2019 was easy for Wayne. It meant he had room to choose. He delayed one non-essential equipment repair package, sold hay strategically when local shortages lifted price, and used custom grazing revenue to cover seasonal shortfalls. Each choice resolved a specific cash pinch without adding debt. Cole had fewer options available, because refinancing one piece stretched maturity and lowered that single payment while tightening collateral for the next renewal cycle. Janice negotiated wherever she could, with suppliers, with service providers, with timing, and she did it with composure, under pressure. By 2020, local debt stress peaked. Commodity movement had been uneven, weather had not been kind in prior years, and several operations faced renewal terms they could not absorb. Cole sold his operation in 2020, a decision that hurt, protected his family from deeper loss, and closed one chapter cleanly enough to build another after lenders required a full balance reset to stop the rollover cycle. He took a salary job managing a seed warehouse where his agronomic knowledge still had value, and his schedule finally had predictable income. Janice stabilized family finances, rebuilt emergency savings, and kept relations warm with Wayne and Ruth. Despite the hard contrast in outcomes, Wayne never used Cole's hardship as a talking point. He had seen too many good families cornered by the same math. The crisis resolved an abstract argument in concrete terms. Debt strategy that looked efficient in ordinary years became brittle under stacked shocks, and debt-free strategy that looked slow-turned resilient under the same shocks. No one needed a lecture because the county had just watched the difference unfold in real time. That same year, Wayne and Ruth made a quiet internal decision that shaped everything after 2020. They would keep growth self-financed and only add capacity that directly improved margin control. The next obstacle they targeted was basis risk on grain movement and storage timing, where forced sales at weak local bids were shaving income. They spent 2021 through 2023 adding 62,000 bushels of grain bin capacity, paid from accumulated cash reserves rather than term debt. This upgrade resolved a pricing constraint because storage allowed sales into stronger windows instead of immediate harvest pressure. The storage build looked expensive from the road, and it was expensive from the ledger too, even when self-financed. Ruth staggered vendor payments in tranches matched to projected seasonal inflows, so operating liquidity never dropped below their safety threshold. Wayne set a rule that no capacity expansion would proceed if emergency cash reserves dipped under target. That process resolved a common expansion trap, building hard assets while starving daily operations. The bins came online without creating payment stress, which meant their benefit actually reached the balance sheet instead of being consumed by financing costs. As margin control improved, herd growth followed a deliberate curve. The herd moved from 42 cows in 2017 toward 186 cows and 7 bulls by 2024, paced to forage, water, and labor reality rather than auction excitement. Wayne culled hard when temperament or efficiency failed standards, and he retained replacements only when feed and pasture data supported it. This resolved scale risk one season at a time. Growth now came from system capacity, not optimism. Hay acreage held at 124 acres, and management intensity changed what those acres produced. Yield moved from 1.9 tons per acre to 4.2 tons per acre over the decade. Maria Ruiz documented that change as farm-specific management outcome driven by drainage function, fertility correction, rest timing, and grazing pressure control. She was careful not to market it as universal expectation. The data described what this farm did under this management, and that precision gave the claim credibility. By the time 2024 arrived, Miller Ridge looked like a place with momentum. Water moved where it should. Fences held. Paddocks carried planned rotations instead of emergency improvisation. Bins let grain leave when bids made sense. The same truck still carried Wayne to town, and that visual kept pulling old assumptions forward. Dale Mercer still read visible status first, and he still believed Wayne was underinvested. He did not know Ruth's ledger had become one of the cleanest private accounting records in the county. The county field day created the perfect collision of appearances and numbers. Maria invited producers, local lenders, extension staff, and a few vendors to review 10-year outcomes on conservation-linked management. Dale attended because major operators usually show up where expansion plans are discussed. Cole came quietly in a warehouse shirt, mostly to see old neighbors and shake a few hands. Janice came too, standing with Ruth near the map table before the program started. 2 women who knew exactly what stress costs and what discipline costs. Maria presented first. Technical and dry in the best sense, she verified water and soil turnaround metrics from county records and on-site sampling. Tile function had reduced prolonged surface saturation in the worst historical trouble spots. Forage production trends matched field logs and delivered measurable carrying capacity gains. She reviewed these as physical outcomes, because physical outcomes explained the financial outcomes that followed. That sequencing resolved skepticism from anyone inclined to dismiss the numbers as accounting tricks. Ruth spoke second, with permission from Wayne, who preferred that the ledger speak through the person who had kept it line by line. She listed major asset categories and values that reconciled to the total. Land revaluation at 318 acres, valued at $2,830,200 under current local comparables, adjusted for condition and productivity. Livestock valuation of $369,300 for 186 cows and 7 bulls at conservative local sale assumptions. Equipment equity valued at $438,000. Grain and input inventory at $97,500. Cash and treasury ladder reserves at $120,000. Total assets, $3,855,000. Total liabilities, $0. Dale did the arithmetic in his head, missed once, and looked down to do it again with his phone calculator. Cole did not look surprised, so much as confirmed. He had watched Wayne choose slow options for 10 years and understood where those options lead when no lender can force a timeline. Janice squeezed Ruth's hand once and asked where she bought the tab dividers she used in that binder. The question landed with dry humor that only people who have lived inside ledgers can appreciate. Wayne finally took the microphone for less than a minute. He thanked Maria for staying with the drainage maps in years when nobody wanted to hear about tile spacing, thanked Ruth for never letting him round a number in the wrong direction, and thanked neighbors who kept showing up to work through bad seasons. He did not mention being doubted, laughed at, or underestimated. He said they had to get home for evening checks. That restraint resolved the scene exactly the way he had lived the decade, by declining performance and returning to chores. The reveal changed Dale Mercer in practical ways faster than in emotional ones. Within months, he approached Wayne with a straight proposal, no condescension, no status reading, and clear cash terms on a used feed mixer package Wayne had been tracking. Wayne reviewed the numbers, negotiated one service inclusion, and paid cash at pickup. The obstacle that resolved here was trust in both directions. Dale stopped treating Wayne like a weak buyer, and Wayne started treating Dale like a vendor whose terms could be efficient. Year 10 could have ended there as a private victory, and still made sense. The story kept moving because Wayne and Ruth had been building capacity for more than self-protection. Cole's 2020 exit had stayed in Wayne's mind, especially how leverage had stripped away choices the moment bad seasons stacked and renewals tightened. A younger producer named Ethan Pike had been piecing together seasonal work, custom baling, and rented ground, and he had the work ethic to run acreage well while lacking starter capital that older generations once built slowly under cheaper land conditions. In early 2025, Wayne and Ruth met Ethan at their kitchen table with Ruth's ledger open and a yellow legal pad between coffee cups. Ethan had a plan for 140 leased acres and knew his cost structure down to fuel assumptions, seed rates, and expected lease terms. His obstacle was initial capital for essential equipment and startup operating cushion, and without that capital he would stay stuck in short-term labor loops. Wayne offered a zero-interest note of $180,000 over 10 years. This resolved Ethan's immediate capital gap and made an owned operating pathway possible. At zero interest, the repayment arithmetic stayed simple and transparent, $18,000 per year for 10 years, starting after Ethan's first full production cycle. Ruth structured the note with plain language and seasonal payment timing, so cash flow matched harvest reality, a direct response to the kind of fixed-date pressure Wayne had watched trap coal when notes came due before weak seasons had cleared. She also included a clause allowing prepayment without penalty if strong years arrived early. That detail resolved a hidden risk in many private loans, rigid terms that break borrowers in uneven seasons. Ethan left with signed papers, a realistic schedule, and no illusion that discipline would be optional. In that same year, Wayne and Ruth funded a scholarship endowment of $250,000 focused on local students entering agriculture, conservation trades, or rural finance. They chose an endowment model instead of one-time gifts because recurring support could outlast their own active farming years. Ruth co-managed the scholarship fund alongside a treasury ladder that kept liquidity predictable while preserving principal. This resolved another long-horizon concern: how to convert private success into community capacity without creating a vanity project that fades after headlines move on. Maria Ruiz remained involved beyond the field day because technical follow-through mattered as much as public recognition. She updated county conservation records with year 10 outcomes and used Miller Ridge as a case study in workshops, always with caveats, context, and clear boundaries around what was farm-specific. Her role resolved a credibility problem that often weakens success stories. Third-party verification separated, measured outcomes from storytelling inflation. Cole's resolution came without melodrama. By late 2025, he was steady in his seed warehouse manager role, no land debt hanging over his household, and no resentment shaping daily life. He still missed the rhythm of running his own fields, and he said so plainly when asked. He also slept through rain forecasts now, which had not happened in years before the sale. Janice kept household finances stable, built savings in deliberate steps, and stayed close with Ruth, proving that contrasting outcomes do not have to harden into personal distance. Dale's resolution stayed practical too. He began treating visible consumption as unreliable evidence of buying power, which improved his own judgment more than he expected. He used Wayne's account as a quiet internal benchmark for evaluating serious buyers, looking at maintenance discipline and cash timing rather than truck paint and jacket brands. That shift did not make him sentimental. It made him better at his job. Ethan's first season on 140 leased acres was lean and careful, exactly as Wayne predicted. He avoided panic purchases, used repaired equipment where possible, and hit his first-year operating targets closely enough to keep his payment schedule intact. Wayne did not hover. He answered specific questions when asked and left the rest to Ethan's own accountability. The mentorship resolved only one thing: access to a fair starting line designed to avoid the rollover pressure that had ended Cole's ownership. Performance still belonged to the person running the acres. By the end of 2025, Wayne and Ruth's role in the county had shifted without fanfare. He was still farming Miller Ridge, still checking fence voltage and water lines himself, and still driving the same pickup until mechanical reality says otherwise. She was still the ledger keeper, now co-managing both the treasury ladder and scholarship governance with the same calm precision that carried them through restoration years. Their generosity did not arrive as image management. It arrived as extension of a balance sheet that no longer needed to defend itself. The farm everyone walked away from in 2014 had become a working demonstration of compounded decisions. Buying 318 acres for $348,000 cash resolved entry, spending $332,000 on restoration from 2014 through 2016 resolved physical collapse, replacing 11.6 miles of tile and rebuilding 8.4 miles of fence resolved production reliability. Starting with 42 cows in 2017 and building to 186 cows and 7 bulls, by 2024 resolved revenue scale at manageable pace, holding hay at 124 acres while yield climbed from 1.9 to 4.2 tons per acre, resolved feed pressure, adding 62,000 bushels of grain storage from 2021 through 2023 resolved basis exposure. Each resolution opened the next decision. The arithmetic in 2024 made those decisions legible. In a single line, net worth $3,855,000, debt $0. This number did not appear overnight and did not depend on a lucky sale. It was built through years where restraint looked like caution to outsiders and looked like control to the people signing invoices. Wayne never had to announce a philosophy. Ruth never had to dramatize a ledger. The farm itself carried the argument in drainage after rain, forage in August, calves held behind reliable wire, and bins that bought timing power at harvest. The social reversal at the field day was satisfying for everyone who had been quietly keeping score. Yet it was never the main event in Wayne's own mind. He had already moved to the next practical question before the crowd left the parking lot: whether the North Water Gap needed another brace before winter. The same trait that kept him from explaining himself for a decade kept him from lingering inside vindication. Work remained, and work kept giving shape to what mattered. When county conversations turn back to Miller Ridge now, they usually start with one concrete memory. Some remember the abandoned place with no habitable house and weeds taller than hood lines. Some remember Cole's hard year and the auction signs that spread across roadsides in 2020. Some remember the field day binder, the moment numbers replaced assumptions, and Dale's face when he ran the total twice. The thread connecting those memories is simple. Ownership built patiently stayed put when borrowed momentum ran out. And that lesson traveled forward into Ethan's note terms instead of ending as nostalgia. Wayne Thornton is still there, debt-free owner of the Transform Farm, still mentoring when asked and now lending carefully where it can open a real path. Ruth Thornton is still beside him, co-managing the Treasury ladder and the scholarship fund with the same exactness that protected every earlier decision. Cole Haskins is stable in his seed warehouse role. Janice Haskins keeps their household strong and their friendships intact. Dale Mercer does business with Wayne on clear cash terms. Maria Ruiz has the verified 10-year metrics in county records. Ethan Pike is farming 140 leased acres under a zero-interest note that gave him a start with dignity and responsibility. The old pickup still rolls into town, and it still carries mud from real work. The odometer keeps climbing past 412,000, 1 mile at a time, while the farm keeps doing what disciplined arithmetic allows a farm to do: survive shocks, create options, and fund somebody else's beginning without risking its own ending.